sent to them, they did not seem to know about this issue, or weren't aware that their policy fell short on that issue, I should say.
Your office made 4 recommendations to the DOJ to address the concerns cited in your memo. 1, what were those for the record? And 2, to your knowledge, what steps has the DOJ taken to implement those recommendations?
So the 4 recommendations were: 1, to make sure there was this one-year appeal process; 2, to notify employees of their right to this process, because obviously you can have a process, but you shouldn't have to have an employee rummage through a lot of policies to find it. 3rd, when there is a suspension, look to see if there are positions they can go into where they can continue to maintain their position while performing work, even without the suspension, if that's the plan. And then 4th, put in place a review to make sure that these are being done timely. And so, because you don't want a situation either where if they can find another job with the security clearance suspension pulled, that they somehow indefinitely stay in that other job. You want them to have that resolved. If they shouldn't be in the job, they should leave, right? Then if it was an unfair suspension, they should be put back to their old job.
And have they taken those recommendations?
They have, and I think very importantly is the requirement that they report regularly to department leadership as to why that hasn't occurred in a timely way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman of California's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and for the witnesses, thank you for your testimony. I want to take this in a slightly different direction. Most of the focus has been on the Department of Justice, as is appropriate. But most of this is history. My concern is tomorrow. My concern is what might be in our future. Project 2025 is a roadmap that the Republican administration may use should Trump win the election. And in Project 2025, there are many things to be concerned about, most of which happen to do with the weaponization of the government, the whole of government, to carry out an agenda. I want to focus on one part of Project 2025, which really hasn't been discussed much, but really should be paid attention to. And that is the redesign of our national security apparatus, putting all senior military officers and career intelligence officers through a loyalty test. And what that might mean for our nation should that come to pass. We can debate whether it would come to pass or not. The election will have something to do with that, but also the willingness or the unwillingness of the new administration to undertake that. What would a loyalty test mean for the military? Wouldn't be their ability to conduct the necessary programs for our national defense, but rather their loyalty to the president and the president's agenda, which may or may not have anything to do with national security. We have some history here that might be useful. For example, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff would not carry out President Trump's political agenda. Certainly willing to carry out the military national security agenda, but not the military agenda. And that earned Chief of Staff General Mark Milley the opportunity for the president to call for his execution. Now, if Project 2025 is the roadmap for the Trump administration, and the Trump administration demands a loyalty test for our senior military generals, colonels, and career intelligence officers, what does that mean for the nation? Posse comitatus is often used. but I believe this committee has from time to time taken a look at the emergency powers of the president, which basically can waive nearly every law. So we may wind up, given Project 2025 and the loyalty tests that seem to be embedded in it, with a military that is capable of involvement in domestic affairs and an intelligence community that's supposed to be looking outside of this nation, involved domestically. So the combination of the current very long list of emergency powers that the president has, together with a loyal military hierarchy and a loyal career intelligence community that is loyal to the president, not necessarily loyal to the Constitution or to the history of our democracy. What could it mean to our nation? A military that is used domestically for political purposes, an intelligence community that is looking inward. Project 2025 presents a very serious challenge. 5 seconds. I'd like all of you to ponder what this would mean. Is it a problem? Mr. Kirschner.
It is, and what I'm reminded of, Representative, is after I graduated law school and I was sent to Army Law School, the JAG school on the campus of the University of Virginia, one thing that was drilled into our heads is you must obey lawful orders, but equally important, I would say more important, you must disobey unlawful orders. Project 2025 would wipe out that second command, which is more important than the first command, and the danger can't be overstated.
I appreciate the forbearance of the chair for that 25 seconds.
Gentleman's time, the gentleman yields back, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. It's disappointing that we need this hearing. Mr. Allen, I want to apologize for what's happened to you. Our country should treat you better.
Thank you for the apology.
Thank you for your long career of service to our country, and I just wanted to ask, your experience spans a couple decades. So over your time in service to our country, just confined to the FBI, what kind of changes? I think the perception back home is the rank and file people at the FBI are people that we want to be there, that we want to support, and frankly, there's not a lot of trust in the current leadership system. And when you ask questions, a lot of my constituents had the exact same questions, and others did. So thank you for taking the courage to just ask an honest question. And the way that was treated is shameful. And we're here today in part because of that. And frankly, Mr. Horowitz is continuing a 3-4 year long, hopefully imminent report that answers the exact same question. So how have you seen the FBI change as someone who moved up through the ranks?
I would say that, unfortunately, in my experience with the culture at the FBI, it's very easy for leaders there to kind of impose their wills on their subordinates. It's a culture where there are a lot of careerists and blue flamers who'll do what they need to climb up the charts and the ladders. And if that includes burning other agents or subordinate employees to get to where they want to get in the organization, whether that's for power or money concerns, that's something I've observed in the culture of the FBI since I started there in 2008 as a contractor, worked for a couple of years, and I got on officially
That was
to the
Plankton.
Charlotte field office in late 2015. So I'd like to say that this is from my personal experience, a sea change, but from what I've seen, there have always been vain careerists within the organization who destroy people in order to climb the charts.
So safe to say we're not always promoting the best and brightest.
I would concur with that statement.
How do we need to change the culture to get it back on track?
I I think there needs to be more accountability and there needs to be a high focus on moral and ethical behavior within the organization. And I think outside checks and balances via policy change where the Bureau isn't allowed to simply just review their own conduct, to truly have an external watchdog force that can actually cause punitive change and enact measures in the organization. I think that's a big part of it. Um, that's what I would advocate for. But I know a lot of the folks that join the FBI, they get into it, and it's not quite what they expected once they get on the inside. So there's a lot of cultural change just from the historical culture of the place that has to change. And I'd like to tell you that I'm shocked that this is where the FBI has come today. But frankly, I'm not shocked at all that this kind of lawless conduct could have occurred within the walls of the organization.
Yeah, sad, but I've heard it from many other people, and frankly, you felt the blunt end of it. And again, hopefully, we can make this right swiftly. And you serve out a good career there. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Mr. Horowitz, in another way, you've done things that my constituents appreciate. You've provided oversight and accountability, and the oversight and accountability function of Congress seems to work. The public finds out about all kinds of things, but they're just so frustrated because at the end of the day, Congress just shuts up and cuts the check. We don't provide reform. We don't provide accountability. Instead, you see people like Mr. Veltri promoted, somewhat validating Mr. Allen's observations, and trusted, as it turns out, with critical investigations. I mean, we saw the FBI. I hope there's an investigation underway on the events in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th. Is there an active Inspector General overview of that?
I actually don't have jurisdiction over that. My understanding is the DHS Inspector General.
Inspector General Kufari does. And as SIGI, the Integrity Committee, you formally directed that. They've tried to target people, even as Inspector Generals. Did you feel sometimes limited or coerced because of how SIGI has changed their behavior over the years?
Yeah, let me just say, I was the chair of CE, not the chair of the Integrity Committee, and by law, that distinction, Congress has separated those two, but the Integrity is part of CE. Look, I've dealt with issues at the Integrity Committee. I think there are improvements that certainly need and can be made, both internally and through legislative action, that would improve the process. But I do think, and I've worked with folks there, that they have tried to exercise their responsibilities as the chair of the as members of the Integrity Committee as best they could.
Well, one thing we absolutely have to do is we have to change the way it's funded. Right now, they're harvesting cash from other agencies, including extra money. And so Congress needs to take action, in particular with funding. My time has expired, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I'll pick up maybe a little bit where my colleague just left off. And the question was about Butler, Pennsylvania. I'm curious to know if any of you are aware as to whether or not the FBI is involved at all in determining what's going on in Springfield, Ohio, because as far as I'm concerned, there is domestic terrorism afoot, and it is at the word of the Republican nominee and his running mate. So do we know if anyone is checking into that on the federal level? I'm just curious. Just a yes or no, anybody?
I don't know.
Okay, perfect. Either way, I want to move on, and I want to talk about Mr. Kirshner. I'm just curious, if you were to define what weaponization of the federal government looks like, just in a quick, short definition, what would it be?
Using the Department of Justice to reward your friends and your criminal associates by delivering pardons after they've been convicted by juries or before their case was even concluded or before their case was even charged, and conversely using the Department of Justice to punish your perceived enemies, order investigations and prosecutions even if they're not warranted by evidence. I'm sorry, that was not brief.
That's okay. It was accurate. Because that's how I see weaponization as well, and it's something that we saw a lot out of Trump specifically, because all of his friends were going to prison, and he's probably got more friends that are headed to prison soon, and if we are lucky, he will find him a cellmate soon as well. But nevertheless, talk about weaponization, because this whole committee feels as if it's projection. I want to go to something that's pretty interesting, but I'm going to start with Mr. Allen. I wasn't on this committee the first time you were here, so this is the first time we're interacting. But I am caught up to speed, and I have a simple question for you, yes or no. Do you believe that career employees like yourself should have your job taken away, even if you've done your job well and followed agency rules? Do you think it's right to be fired just because you have political disagreements with those above you?
No, it's not right to persecute anyone for their political or religious beliefs, especially in an organization where there's supposed to be the free flow of ideas.
Okay, I appreciate your answer and your honesty, and I absolutely agree with you. It is interesting, though, because that's exactly what Trump and my Republican colleagues would do if they won the election. It's spelled out in Project 2025. Trump would strip due process rights available to career civil servants and remove, suspend, or reduce their pay in an all-out effort to oust agency employees for partisan reasons rather than because of issues with merit or performance. And before you say Trump and Project 2025 aren't affiliated, I'd ask unanimous consent to submit into the record Trump's campaign page where he claims criminal laws against providers and distributors of abortion medication, as well as rescinding policies that hold that sex discrimination includes discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, transgender identity, among other things. Is that correct?
Yes, Representative, on page 562, they talk about aggressively going after prosecuting, quote, providers and distributors of abortion pills that use the mail. So folks who are, mailing abortion pills to women who need it, that is really not what is endangering our country or inspiring, violent crime.
I absolutely agree. This week, the New York Times reported multiple instances of Trump trying to weaponize the DOJ to retaliate against his political enemies, finding that, quote, Mr. Trump told Mr. McGahn that he wanted to order Mr. Sessions, the Attorney General, to prosecute Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Comey, and if Mr. Sessions refused, he would take matters into his own hands. I know my time is running out, so I just have to ask, Mr. Chairman, given you've convened this hearing, theoretically it's you, given that you've convened this hearing on weaponizing federal agencies, will you commit to publicly condemning Trump for attempting to weaponize the government and condemn Project 2025 for its efforts to do the same?
Gentlelady's time has expired. And now I recognize myself for 5 minutes. And Mr. Allen, I'm going to give you a little notice. You've written some notes. As far as I'm concerned, you're the person I'm most interested in hearing from. I'm from Charlotte. I've been to the Charlotte field office. I know some people there. I was extraordinarily impressed by you and the other whistleblowers when you previously appeared before the subcommittee. I'm impressed by you again. I haven't been able to be here the whole time. I'm going to yield you some time, just if you have things that you wish to say in just a moment. But the first thing I'm going to say before I do that, and then I'm going to give Mr. Jordan the rest of my time, is I'm just overwhelmingly troubled by the fact that no one seems to be able to do much about what has happened to you. You got the Inspector General, very respectable person. You've done a lot of things that have been historic, but you issue a management alert. And to me, it sounds ridiculous to say you don't think these guys at the FBI, the senior managers, understand that they shouldn't retaliate against somebody by putting them under extreme personal hardship while they engage in a completely baseless persecution over their security clearance, and they leave them in limbo for 27 months, and to this moment haven't paid what I understand to be the consideration under the settlement that's been reached. That is astonishing. And if it's not, that's not astonishing enough, that all you can do is issue an alert. Congress does absolutely nothing. In the majority party, not one thing to impose on the Department of Justice or the FBI an appropriate sanction for what they've done. And we have a hearing about it, and everybody in the minority party, they're fearing what Donald Trump would do in the next administration while they sit here and they look at the guy who's been persecuted by the FBI. And everybody in the room understands it. Mr. Allen, do you have comments you wish to make? I give you about a minute and a half, and then I want to turn the rest of my time to Mr. Jordan.
Yes, sir. I would just say that I consider the hearing today my last act of service as a public servant for the United States of America. And I'll give you my professional opinion. I was an intel professional for our country for many years, and I would give recommendations, and I'd also look at indications and warnings. So I'd offer this to the American people as my warning to them. Since this is a warning to the American people, I say, I personally have no confidence that the FBI will rein in its own conduct. I've been persecuted along with Garrett, Steve, and Kyle, and countless other whistleblowers. It is my opinion that the Bureau used reprisal and fear to control the workforce. It has been a seemingly effective tactic. I personally believe that there are no current effective checks and balances against them conducting lawless action with any type of correction in a legitimate time frame. I welcome the work of the IG, but I think any type of lawless action, there's no legitimate time frame to rein them back in. Their ability to overclassify information can allow them to stonewall forever. To the American people, you have the duty as a citizen to vote, and I strongly urge you to do so. It's how you participate in the American experience. I know people have doubts.
No, I'm still gonna eat that.
But you must vote. It is your claim. State your claim and don't forfeit it willingly. Have your voice heard. My other recommendations are in the natural order. First, vote. The second is the Second Amendment. Arm yourself and know how to defend yourself. Make 3 to 4 friends in your neighborhood and promise to come to each other's mutual aid in times of hardship. And during the Great Depression, people stocked up the pantry. So I think that's a good practice, especially in our economic times, and make sure you have 3 to 4 months of food. As a person of faith, I'd say pray the rosary, go to the First Friday devotions. That's for everybody, all my brothers and sisters of all faiths, and I know I'm Catholic, and read the gospel of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and live it every day. And that's all I have to say. Thank you for the time.
You know, Mr. Allen, the fact that there are servants like you who have not borne up under persecution that a lot of political leaders in this country do not care about is the thing that heartens the American people, and I'm confident the American people will resolve the situation, no matter how weak Washington is in response. Mr. Jordan, I'm sorry I didn't reserve much time for you, but I yield to you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen, for those well-said words. Mr. Horowitz, did you ever request permission from the Deputy Attorney General to investigate attorney misconduct in Special Counsel David Weiss's office?
I have not at this point asked for that authority. As we've engaged on this issue in the past, it's first of all not clear whether we have that authority. I'd have to have that discussion. But secondly, while the prosecution was ongoing, it was my view, consistent with our policy and practice, to let that prosecution play out. And then,
do you have concerns?
I think there have been a number of legitimate concerns raised. Yes, Congressman.
Time has expired.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Donald Trump's Project 2025 is direct attack on women's reproductive freedom and health care. And one of its most effective assaults on our rights comes from its call to criminally punish healthcare providers who distribute FDA-approved abortion medication by mail. This would effectively end access to a safe legal procedure that 2/3 of American women who seek an abortion rely on. And how would Trump's Project 2025 do that, Mr. Chairman? By weaponizing our federal government against women and doctors. The most corrosive attack would direct the Justice Department to ban the mailing of abortion pills by enforcing an obscure 1873 obscenity law called the Comstock Act. You heard that right, a 151-year-old obscenity law. Mr. Kirshner, could reviving this 19th century statute and weaponizing DOJ to enforce it block a clinician from sending abortion pills to patients?
It could.
And yes or no, could it stop the manufacturers from even delivering mifepristone pills to clinicians and pharmacies?
It seems it could.
Trump's Project 2025 directs the Justice Department to start using its surveillance powers to monitor these pill makers and goes so far as to name them in their blueprint. Mr. Kirshner, could that kind of shadowing result in medicine companies being targeted and harassed?
Yes.
Could weaponizing the Justice Department to enforce this Civil War era law in fact create a de facto nationwide ban on mifepristone?
It could.
This isn't about politics. This is about control. It's about denying women the ability to make decisions about our own bodies. It's about putting Donald Trump and J.D. Vance right in the exam rooms of doctors and millions of women. It's about punishing and even jailing doctors who provide compassionate care or loved ones who help you obtain the health care that you seek. Mr. Kirshner, I want to ask you about another way Trump's Project 2025 would weaponize our government against millions of women and doctors. The medicine we're talking about, mifepristone, has been deemed safe and effective by the FDA for over 25 years. Women in nearly 100 countries have safely used it for decades. Yet, Mr. Kirshner, Trump's Project 2025 would require the FDA to, quote, revisit and withdraw its initial approval of mifepristone, falsely claiming without evidence these drugs are dangerous and should be illegal. Would that Project 2025 agenda be based on sound medicine, science, and facts, or would it be a blatant weaponization of the FDA?
The latter, and it sounds like it's based on politics, not on science, not on medicine, and not on what is best for women and the decisions they have to make with their doctors.
Thank you. The FDA recently allowed certified brick-and-mortar pharmacies to dispense mifepristone and doctors to prescribe mifepristone via telehealth, which expands abortion pill access, avoids added costs or stigma. But Trump's Project 2025 calls for the FDA to reverse that guidance, despite the Supreme Court recently rejecting that argument. It goes even further by eroding the privacy protections of abortion patients by promoting prosecution for women who take the pills. Could this weaponization of our government agencies obliterate the privacy of those who obtain or dispense abortion pills?
It could, and it's dangerous.
Project 2025's assault on our basic freedoms doesn't just stop at women's health. It undermines the safety of whole regions of our nation. Before my time expires, I'll quickly note that Trump's dangerous Project 2025 proposes to eliminate the National Weather Service in its entirety. I'll remind everyone that we have Hurricane Helene, who is quickly approaching the shores of my state. This is the very agency responsible for helping us prepare for and respond to climate change-driven natural disasters. Right now, Hurricane Helene bears down on Florida, and it's the National Weather Service that provides critical forecasts that help warn and keep our communities safe. Let's be absolutely clear. Project 2025 is not about reform, it's about control. Whether it's women's bodies or the agencies that protect us from disaster, Trump's Project 2025 would erode the freedoms that we all take for granted. We cannot allow Trump's dangerous agenda to strip away our rights and leave millions more vulnerable than ever. Whether it's criminalizing healthcare providers or dismantling the National Weather Service as more hurricanes threaten our coasts, Project 2025 is an existential threat to our nation's core values and safety. We will not let this agenda undo everything we've fought for, because we will not go back. Thank you. I yield back the balance of my time.
General yields back. Chair S&M's consent to enter into the record a coalition's letter on reforms that are needed. The letter is addressed to Chairman Comer, Chairman Turner, and myself, Ranking Member Nadler, Raskin, and Himes. Without objection, that will be entered. Chair now will recognize the ranking member for as much time as she'd like. I'll give you 6, 7 minutes, 8 minutes if you'd like, and then our closing statement after that. And then I have a couple more questions, and then we'll be adjourned. Gentle ladies recognized.
Thank you. I don't know what you do with all that time. Kind of freaked me out when you said that. I just started.
You can always yield it back to me.
Oh no, I don't think I'm not giving up what's given to me. I'll tell you that much. You never know when you can get that, but I appreciate it, Mr. Chair. And I want to thank our witnesses for being here, each one of you. Thank you for expressing your ideas and your thoughts. I did want to ask some follow-up questions, though, to some of those. Mr. Inspector General Horowitz, my colleagues across the aisle have said that the Inspector General found that the FBI intentionally weaponizes the security clearance process to purge conservatives from its ranks. Mr. Inspector General, did your office find that the FBI has a pattern or practice of misusing the security clearance adjudication process to purge certain FBI employees?
We have not made such a finding.
Okay. And also, there were allegations made that the FBI has weaponized the